Alright, so we're going to be doing a draw over of a video that I pre-recorded for this project. We're going to be starting off with a cube, and we're going to be adding a mirror modifier, which means we're going to be deleting one side of the cube. And we're going to be going over here and selecting the mirror modifier, which is right here, and it's going to be on the x-axis. This is going to help us to shape the body a little bit faster and allow us to block it out on both sides simultaneously. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be adding the torso part right here, and then the abdomen area, and then it's going to be going into the thighs, and then it's going to be kind of branching off like this, and then here's where you're going to have your crotch region, and then it's going to go into the calves, and then it's going to be kind of going straight down like this. So you kind of want to remember this for when you're blocking out your characters. Super important. All right. Okay. Yeah. Right now I'm not worried about proportions or anything like that. I'm just worried about just kind of getting the overall shape of the character. This could be as stylized as you want. Doesn't really matter. Because when you go in, you're going to be sculpting it anyways to make it more refined. As you can see, I am pushing those calves up a little bit further to make it look as if her calves or her shins are a little bit, more thinner. Okay, so right here, what we're going to be looking for is this is going to be basically where the neck is. Then it's going to drop into this kind of like S shape in the back where it's going to droop down into the butt area. And then it's going to kind of come along here like this. And it's going to be kind of going into the calf area. So it's going to kind of smoothen down as it gets into the calf area. Technically, when you're doing a side profile, so kind of something like this, and then it kind of like, you have your pelvis bone, and then it kind of droops into your knee area. And then your knee, and then it kind of like comes back a little bit, and then it goes like straight. It's typically like, here's your butt, here's the the bottom of your butt, and then here's like the kind of like that smooth transition into the back of your thigh. Here's your pelvis bone. Here's your stomach, and then that's going to kind of come in, and then your thigh on the your front of your thigh is actually going to come out a little bit, and then it's going to kind of go down like this. Okay, so just like this. This is how you kind of want to set it up, and then of course you're going to have your lower back right here, and then it's going to transition slowly up into your upper back. Same with your rib cage. It's going to kind of transition a little bit slowly into your rib cage, and then you're going to have your like breasts probably right around here. So it's going to kind of look like that. That's what you're going for the side profile. You kind of want to have this like little slope, and then this droop because of the gravity. If there was no gravity, you'd probably have a butt like this, but you want gravity, so it's going to slope down a little bit, and it's going to kind of, create that nice little droop like that. Okay. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that S shape on the side. Adding in some more geometry with Control R, and we're going to be adding the arms. So right here, the arms should basically be about the same kind of shape. It should be kind of like the maximum width up here as it tapers in towards a little bit of a shorter or a smaller shape. And then here come the forearms, and they're basically going to do the same thing. They're kind of going to branch out, and then they're going to come down into the wrist area. So that's kind of like the shape you want. You want basically kind of like this shape as it's going down. Sorry, I am doing this with the mouse, so it's kind of like wibbly wobbly, but yeah, you kind of want this like shape like this for the arms, but more elongated. And I'm kind of imagining a head right here. I do bend the arms a little bit on all of my characters just because it's easier to get the anatomy right. I also make the arms in an A shape as well. And I'm also looking for that hourglass figure, so wide-ish shoulders and then a very wide waist. It helps me to kind of see what I'm going to be sculpting. A lot of this stuff can be erased because during sculpting it's going to get erased. As you can see, I push her knees up a little bit more. Shouldn't have done that. It breaks the proportions, but it's okay because I end up fixing that a little bit later on. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is going to be readjusted and refixed. So don't really worry too much about getting it perfect. As when you start to sculpt in the anatomy, you start to see things that are really weird looking. So this is all just like basic modeling. It's just kind of adding in loops and, adding in very, very poor low res detail. I dropped her waist a little bit lower because I wanted her to be a little bit longer. And I wanted her legs to be a little bit more narrow, so I ended up trying to make those a little bit thinner. Just testing different style of placement just to see what it would look like. Pushing in the knees a little bit more. And now we're just adding the feet. The feet are something that we're going to do a little bit later on. They're not going to be something that's the main focus of this character right away, simply because she might be wearing shoes, so you never really know if you're going to see the feet of the character. Here I just kind of block in some basic hands. Again, the hands are going to come in a little bit later because they're just something that's not the main focus right now. The main focus is just getting the body to look right. Here's where I'm adding in the thumb. I'm just kind of extruding just a basic piece off. Again, this is all going to be redone because it's just a placeholder, so it's not really anything that I'm too worried about. But I also wanted it to look pretty decent to help me with getting in the mood of sculpting the character. So I kind of gave her like a kind of hook kind of shape, just so that, when I do start to sculpt the body and I want to present it, it doesn't look like it's, she's got crab claws or whatever. She's got, some actual geo there. And it's just more appealing that way. And when we start to go over hands, I'll actually do more drawovers for the hands. But as of right now, this is all just kind of placeholder, so there's really no point to doing drawovers of something that's going to be erased. I'm pushing the chest out a little bit more. And the back, just pushing in the neck and the back out a little bit more just to try to get more width in her body. And then I start to kind of try to round off the body just a little bit more. Again, it helps with seeing what I'm trying to do with the model. And again, just adding in some loops. And again, this is all just very, very, very basic. It's not going to be too detailed. It's just something that's going to help you go, okay, this is where the head is, this is where this anatomy is, so it's going to help you to be like, okay, You know, this is where the neck is. One thing I used to do when I was working inside of ZBrush is I would actually just like kind of use spheres and blob those out to make anatomy, and honestly I feel like this is a little bit better for me because it allows me to have a base right away. It didn't take me very long to do this. It only took me about, I don't know, 30 minutes. So not very long, but when I was doing it with spheres, it would take a lot longer. It would take almost like an hour. Okay. As you can see, I'm trying to get that same shape that I did with her arms. You know, just making sure the meat is at the top and then it kind of transitions down into the joint. And there we go. Got a pretty decent looking model so far. I spend a little bit more time with the head and modeling the head and making sure that that's pretty decent. But overall this is looking all right. It's not the greatest, but it is definitely, you know, not the worst thing that you could start off with. But it's definitely a perfect thing to start off with to you know, start your modeling. All right. So I'm kind of just doing another pass over, looking at it, seeing what I could change, what could look better. And I noticed her wrists were a little bit too thick, so I ended up making sure that those were a lot thinner, and then I ended up pushing her ankles up a little bit more to make her feet a little bit thicker. And then I push her chest out a little bit more because, again, I wanted her chest to be just a little bit more thicker and her body to be more thick. Same with the pelvis area. I'm bringing up the back of her lower back a little bit more just to kind of shorten her torso. And you're probably looking at this and going, wow, this is kind of awful, but this is where I actually ended up saving it and saving it over an old project, but that's cool. So I do duplicate these off just in case I want to use them again, and just in case I want to go back to the basics. All these files will be available to patrons on my Patreon, so that they can use them for their own characters. And I separate the base from the sculpt, just in case I want to use the same base again for a different project and I want to adjust it and, you know, things like that. So now we're in the sculpting. I'm actually choosing some madcaps. I usually choose a dark madcap. It's easier on my eyes, and you know, that up against a white background, it's easier to see the silhouette. And I'm turning on symmetry up here. So this is symmetry right here. These are your symmetry options. And remesh allows you to basically turn this into a higher poly. So the lower this value is, the higher resolution your model is going to be. Just don't try to push this past its limits, or else you will kill your computer. Just to be aware of that, and make sure that, you know, holes like this right here are not so close together, because when you are using voxels, it will basically do what Dynamesh does. It'll create a mesh around it to kind of generate the mesh, a new mesh. So it's basically looking at this and it's generating a new mesh based on the shape of this. So if it's too close together, it's not going to read that, and you're going to have a problem with that, okay? So that's essentially what those are. And I'm dropping that down to about 0.02. That's what my computer can handle. And then I turn on X symmetry to kind of get started with the just smoothing all this out at this point. It's already at a pretty good volume for me to kind of smooth it down and not lose too much volume in it. And we're just kind of getting rid of those like sharp corners. And as you can see, like just by smoothing this down, we're already getting a kind of solid base to start off with. Okay, I'm actually going to speed up the video here until we get to more of the refinement, because all this is really just smoothing down all of these nasty creases and making the mesh a little bit more clean for sculpting. I end up using inflate, which is over here, to inflate some of the volume back in, because we do lose a little bit of volume with our smoothing brush. As you can see, I'm using the inflate to get that volume back in the hands. I don't want to make her too thin, because then the mesh will start to look really weird when you start sculpting and making her really thin and working off of that. So make sure you're keeping your volumes pretty big in proportion to what a human would look like. And we're just kind of rounding everything off at this point. We're just smoothing down all these sharp corners and rounding everything off. And I'm also trying to keep that silhouette shape. And in the next video, we will be going over landmarks. In this video, we will touch up on landmarks a little bit, but in the next one, we will be going more over landmarks. Okay, so here I'm actually putting in the neck muscles just a little bit, and that's just giving it a little bit of volume. I often do that to kind of help me see where the muscles are going to be, the muscle structure. That way I can put in the volume properly. But I don't do it to the point where I'm actually, like, you know, sculpting. I'm just doing it just to put the volume in. Okay, making her thighs a little bit bigger because she is a female, so just kind of putting in those feminine hips. Shaving down a little bit of volume off the bottom of her forearm, so you take it a step back. Usually what I'm looking for when I'm doing volume for the forearm is I'm actually looking for a little bit of meat on the bottom, and that's going to transition into her wrist, and then for the top it's going to kind of be more up here and then transition like this, and then you're going to have her deltoid that's going to come down, meet right around here, and then kind of be like into her bicep. So then you have kind of like this space right here where the joint is, where it's going to be, you know, this Y shape right here. And this is basically kind of like this spacing in here. That's where the tendons are going to be crossing. Okay. Just kind of getting the world set up more comfortable for actually sculpting. If you can't see the silhouette of your model, then you're going to have a hard time sculpting. So I kind of just get it set up in a kind of environment by setting the world to viewport, and then setting the color of the viewport to a more kind of like nicer color to sculpt in. And of course, staying organized. All right, so here we're going to be blocking in the abdomen region. So when you are using the abdomen region or the landmarks for the abdomen region, you're going to have your abdomen that's going to go right here, and then it's going to kind of go into your pelvis, and that's going to create a kind of abdomen muscle region. And then of course you're going to have your ribs that are going to be right here coming in. So these are going to be like your most visible ribs right here. And then of course you're going to have your pectoral muscles coming down like this to reach your rib cage. So it's going to be, your pectorals are actually pretty long when it comes to that. So it's going to be like right around here. But the most notable ones is going to be like up here where it's going to kind of fan up and connect up here. So yeah, it's going to try to like get to your sternum area, and then it's going to like go all the way to your sternum area, and then it's going to fan up like this, and then connect to the underneath of your arm right down here. And then of course you're going to have your obliques that are going to be on the sides right here. All of this is like your oblique region, and that's going to be like connecting into your hips. Okay. But basically the overall silhouette is basically like you want your pectorals to kind of connect into right here, connecting into your ribs, connecting into your obliques, connecting into your thighs and your pelvis. So right here is kind of like where you're getting your hourglass figure. You got your ribs, you got your oblique area, then you got your pelvis and your thighs. Like that. So it's kind of making this kind of like this kind of shape like that. Hourglass figure. Okay. Oops. So right here I'm actually making the pelvis bone, and I'm just gonna actually cut into the mesh and indent it a little bit, because that's where the abdomen is gonna kind of sit over the thigh and kind of create that illusionary look of the pelvis bone in the mesh. And I'm also making the crotch region as like a upside down V, or excuse me, a right side up V. And then of course we're doing the rib cage, the collarbones. These are going to go all the way to the midsection of the shoulder, about right here. So if we actually take that back, it's going to actually go to the midsection, about right here. So we're going to have our collarbones that are going to come up, and then they're going to go back into our midsection. And from the top view, it's actually going to be a little bit of a swerve like this. So here's the left collarbone from the front view, and then here's the right one. So it's going to kind of curve in like this. All right. And then here would be the front of your throat, like that, you know. And then here's the neck muscles right here, connecting to your collarbones right here. So like this. Okay. So when I'm doing this, I'm actually thinking like, here's the collarbone. It's going to go all the way back. So I'm actually drawing this kind of straight line all the way back, and then it's, you know, it's touching right here. And then of course you got your pectorals, and then you have that little space in between your pectoral and your deltoid right here. That's going to be a little bit concave. So I actually end up drawing all of this with the sculpting brushes. All right. And then of course you're going to have your pectoral muscles fanning down like that. Right. And they're going to be going into the lower part of your arm right here. All right. Underneath, of course. And then of course you're going to have your deltoids that are going to come around like this, and then your bicep is going to come around like this, and then your triceps are going to come around like that. Okay. So we're just kind of building in that collarbone structure, and also the neck muscles going into the collarbone, and then kind of just spacing between the collarbone and the trapezius and the back muscles. creating that little indentation in our pectoral deltoid region, and then kind of extending that underneath the collarbone. Again, this is all just like building up the volume with the draw, inflate, and everything. So I'm kind of like imagining how it would be if like a piece of like plastic were vacuum sucked to a muscled structure, and then I kind of just go in and fill that out. And I want the waist to accentuate the fact that she's female, so I kind of like bring in the obliques a little bit more, make those smaller, and make her shoulders a little bit longer. These are all things that are also going to be fixed later on, because when you start to put features on the character, you start to realize that it doesn't look too appealing the way it is, so you start to change features. But essentially this is just all like, you know, getting everything ready to kind of like detail it and finalize it. So we're pulling out those scapulas. And I usually try to do an hourglass figure all the way around the model, so not just from the front, but from the back and from the sides and from 3/4, trying to keep that hourglass figure all the way around as an appealing shape. Now we're actually sculpting in the butt and the trapeze, or excuse me, the lats. And we're just kind of making landmarks that are going to help us. So we're drawing in that kind of center line landmark that goes all the way through the abdomen, all the way down to the crotch area. And we're also kind of putting in that V shape for the vagina area or the crotch area, and then making these shapes for the knees. So half of a C on the inner part of the knee. So when I'm actually starting off with the knee, I actually like to put kind of like a moon shape right here, or half of a C shape right here. And then on this side, I kind of like to indent it a little bit, so it kind of gets this kind of like look to it. It just kind of helps, again, with landmarks and the way the knee should look in a stylized fashion. Just kind of helps me out. Building in the rib cage. So the rib cage is actually going to be, for a female, it's actually going to be kind of like, it's actually a lot further down, but it's thinner. So the oblique muscles are actually hiding a lot of the rib cage, right? And then here's the abdomen area that's going to be coming down right here. And it's actually a lot more like thicker as it gets towards the top, and then it gets thinner as it gets towards the crotch region. And then, of course, the obliques are going to come in and hide a lot of the rib cage, but the rib cage is actually kind of like going in a fashion of like this right here, where you got to kind of imagine the rib cage kind of coming in like an egg, but it has like this kind of like look to it right here, and here's the sternum, and then here's where the ribs are kind of sitting. And they go all the way up like this. All right. This is barely going to be visible because you're going to have muscle structure over it. Like you're going to have the pectorals over it. You're going to have the deltoids. And even the upper obliques are going to be over it as well. So a lot of this structure is going to be hidden. But I just wanted to let you know that a lot of these ribs that are like the top ribs, like up here through here, are going to be the most visible, because as a woman's rib cage gets lower, it actually gets a little bit more kind of narrow towards the bottom of it. So as a male, it gets actually a lot bigger like this and more wider, but as a female, it gets more narrow. So a lot of these rib cages up here are going to be, or a lot of these ribs up here are going to be visible, while these ones are not visible, because you're going to have the obliques falling off like this into the pelvis and then the thighs, if that makes any sense. All right, so hopefully that made a little bit of sense, but that's why I usually you know, have like these ribs right here showing, but then all of these ones are kind of like, you know, a little bit further down, are missing. or not missing, but, you know, not visible. That may not be like accurate anatomy, but for me it's appealing anatomy and it works. So I just keep on practicing and trying to get it as, you know, accurate as I possibly can. I'm not a guru when it comes to anatomy, so I'm really trying to learn anatomy. And every single time I try to get closer and closer to the goal of, you know, making it better and making it more accurate. All right, so for the butt region, I actually I try to connect the butt pretty much all the way up here, and then it kind of like connects down like this. And the where it is the most like connected is probably right around this region right here, where it's like mostly like closest together. And then as it gets further up through here, it starts to blend in with the I believe they call it the iliac crest, and then it kind of has like this muscle structure right through here where the pelvis region is, and then you're going to have your lats that are going to come down and connect to that, and then you're going to have your obliques coming through here and connecting to the thigh bone and the pelvis region right through here, I believe. So it's going to create this little bit of a dimple right here and right here, which is you know, where this structure comes from. But the butt is actually interesting because it's actually going to kind of puff out a little bit as it gets around this like area right here. It's going to kind of structure like this. So you're going to have a plane that goes through here, a plane that goes through here, and then a plane that comes down through here, where all of the meat is going to kind of transition, right? So you're going to have like this plane right here where it kind of drops off and kind of curves, and then this is where it's kind of like curving down towards that plane. So these are transition points. And as it's getting up further towards this, it gets a little bit less visible. As it gets towards the obliques, it gets less visible. Again, that's probably because of gravity pushing it down and making it, you know, look like it's more sagging down and giving you that butt crease. So that's essentially what I do. I kind of like connect it all the way up here, but as it's getting further down, it's getting more and more noticeable as a butt because of gravity. All right. So that's what I'm visualizing in my head. I'm also trying to keep that pelvis bone visible as well, just to try to have something to connect the planes to. As you can see, I'm kind of like trying to build up that plane, that transition. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just something to scribble so that you can see later on, like when you have fresh eyes, like where is that going to be at? And usually butts from the top view are coming in like this. So here's the butt from the top. And then obviously this is the outermost thigh. So you kind of want to keep that in mind from the top view. You kind of want to have this shape. Don't do it like this. And don't do it like this, because those aren't how butts are shaped from the top view. It's actually shaped, a female's butt is actually shaped with a little bit of a kind of like slope on each side going towards the inner part of the cheek. So this is obviously the butt crack, and then this is where it transitions to the outer cheek, and then it transitions to the thigh right here. So that's also the shape that I'm trying to get from the top view. And I try not to make the silhouette too noisy. Like I try to make it just noisy enough to where it's appealing shapes and not noisy to where it's just like these crazy muscle structures that, you know, they do make sense, but as you the more you look at them, the more unappealing they are. So try to make sure that you are like making these shapes, but you're transitioning them well to where they actually look appealing and not like, you know, oh, I put that there. And again, that's something that I also need to work on. I'm not the greatest when it comes to like, making structure and stuff like that or anatomy, but I am trying to make it more accurate every single day. And again, I remeshed to make the, obviously new geometry easier to work with. Don't worry too much about what the knees look like, what the shins look like. The only thing that you should be worried about is just kind of building in the muscle structure and trying to make it look accurate as much as possible. I think that a lot of people have a lot of problems with the butt area. It's one of the hardest things to actually make look right in 3D because you have to look at it from all angles. Don't just look at it from like, front, side view, top and bottom. You got to look at it from every which way, to make sure that it looks, like a butt. So there's going to be a lot of refinement on this. And right here, I'm just kind of dragging it down, making sure the butt cheeks are a little bit more elongated. Making sure that silhouette isn't too noisy by kind of pushing out a little bit of that muscle structure. And then making the hourglass figure from the 3/4 view, like I said before. I try to keep that hourglass figure as much as I can from all angles. And the breasts are going to give us actually the front hourglass figure once we put the breasts in. But I don't like to do that until I know I've got a good solid foundation. So one thing that's cool about Blender is that if you actually right click on anywhere right outside of the window, you can actually split the window, vertical or horizontal. This will give you kind of like a navigation window, much like if you were working in Photoshop. The reason why this is good is so that you're not always constantly zooming out. You can actually see your model from a zoomed out perspective without actually having to go through the hassle of zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in. You can just quickly look over to your reference or to your zoomed out model in a new window, and you can just kind of go off of that of what you need to change and what you need to make look better. So that's why I kind of do that. And it gives me another model to look at so that I'm not always, constantly zooming out, zooming in, zooming out. Here I'm getting the back shape. So right here, you're going to have your scapulas that are going to be sort of tilted outwards as your character's arms are floating out. And then those are going to be actually connected up here to obviously the shoulder joints, right? And then you're going to have a lot of space in here that's going to kind of be indented. And then you're going to have your traps that are going to be going through here, right? And then they're going to be coming down like this. And then it's going to make this little bit of a diamond spacing in your traps. That's going to be connected to the base of your neck. And then that's going to be coming down over your shoulder blades just ever so slightly. And then that's going to actually transition into your lats that are going to be transitioning all the way down through here and then connecting to your pelvis right through here. So it's going to be split like this. Your lats are going to be coming down. That's going to transition, excuse me, into your trapezius. So, and then of course you have your scapula muscles that are going to be connecting to your delt area right through here. I'm not entirely sure as to what they call those. Again, I'm not the greatest when it comes to anatomy, but I know enough to get me by and make stuff look okay. But yeah, that's your lats are going to connect all the way down to your pelvis or your iliac crest region right down here. All right. So make sure that you're actually getting getting that structure to look a little bit more decent and a little more accurate. All right. Here I am building in that structure with the scapula area, and then trying to build in the lats. And again, just making the abdomen area a little bit more straight with the and in line with the chest. And just kind of bringing out those ribs a little bit more. Not too much though. I ended up dropping the strength down of my brushes because I don't like the fact that it's a little bit too harsh, and I am using a mouse to sculpt, so it's a little bit harder for me. As you can see right here, I'm actually pushing the collarbones in a little bit more. Pretty much like the top of your, your neck region where your neck is resting on your collarbone area and trap area isn't really that thick. It's not bulging out so much. It's actually a very small space. So I ended up pushing the collarbones back a little bit, just so that it's not looking like there's a ton of space in between my collarbones, or the collarbones and the neck. We're just kind of making her legs a little bit more thinner as they go further down. More anime look. And we're going to be doing this for a little while. It's going to be, just going through, looking at really weird angles and trying to fix those weird angles, and trying to get it to a point where we actually like it. So at this point, I am going to do a time-lapse video and basically just keep refining the mesh and keep working on the shapes. This is where you want to heavily rely on your references as much as you possibly can, and make sure that you're studying those references, isolating those areas, and making sure that those areas look pretty close to what you're going for. Don't try to look at the entire thing as an entire model. Try to isolate each area piece by piece and try to make it look as accurate to the isolated areas in your references piece by piece. Okay? And then once you're satisfied with the way it looks, go in and kind of adjust the proportions, sizes, and whatever. That's usually what I do. A lot of this stuff is inaccurate when it comes to proportions, but I don't really care about that at the moment. All I'm trying to do is isolate these areas, make them look decent, and then I'll go in and I'll just adjust the proportions and things like that once I'm, comfortable with the way they look. All right. So the rest of this is going to be like 10 minutes. It's going to be a time lapse. All right. I hope you guys learned a little bit during this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and take care.